Welcome, beautiful friends. Welcome to Elemental Connections, where we're giving voice to the unseen realms of nature. And today we have Yannick with us. Welcome, Yannick. Thank you for coming here and being the first man that I've interviewed as well. Feels exciting to open it out a little bit.
Yeah, hi Layla, thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for being here. So Yannick is an artist and an illustrator, works with adults and children, and has spent the last 2.5 years in the UK training in Bushcraft from a Native American lineage and modern Druidry. So you're really immersed in nature.
Yeah, it was a big adventure in the last years especially, and I feel that I've got new words and concepts for things that I was doing beforehand, that I was doing intuitively when I was younger, and was a real eye-opener to find that there's many other people who are interested in the same kind of practices and just ways of connecting. Yeah.
Beautiful. So did you have connections with elemental realms and these realms before your training?
Yeah, I must say that before I got any ideas or concepts around connecting with nature, I just felt drawn to be in nature, and had some kind of unusual ideas. When I was a teenager, I was asking myself questions like, why is everyone afraid to be in the dark forest? And I just took my bicycle and I went out at night to the edge of the forest, and I remember just standing there and feeling all that fear and really wanting to go into the forest, but at the same time wanting to run away. And what happened is that the first 2 or 3 times I just went home and I couldn't get myself into the forest, and then at some point I just walked in for maybe 100 meters, and I just stood there for 5 minutes, and I was so excited and everything felt really alive, and then I quickly ran back out of the forest. So slowly I followed these impulses from a younger age, and I felt that a lot of what I know from my experiences has later on been confirmed through teachers from different backgrounds.
Beautiful. So where should we start? Is there somewhere you'd like to start with sharing a story or some experiences that you've had in nature?
I think a good place to start might be to look at words, nature, spirits, and elementals.
I love that. I was thinking that just like a few moments ago. I was thinking, I wish I'd sort of said like we'd had a conversation about the words that we use. So yeah, I'd love to. That's a great place to start.
Okay, so the way I perceive it is that it's slightly vague terms like nature, spirits, elementals. There's a lot of associations and images that people have around it, where the way I perceive nature is that it is spirit, and spirit is nature. They're just one side is manifested and the other side is more subtle, but they're still part of the same whatever we want to call it, life or what we're experiencing. And there's so many layers to different aspects of spirit and nature. And if you like, I can give you a little overview of how I perceive and how I distinguish between different parts.
Yeah, that would be great to hear that.
So from a Druidic perspective, we always start by observing nature and then crafting relationships, which means just to bring them into awareness and become conscious of the relationships that are already there, but start to really be creative with relationships and asking ourselves how to deepen relationships. And that's not just between humans, but also between human and animal, human and plant. And the third element is to quest for inspiration, which could be an inspiration for dancing or music or artwork or poetry. And I always like this trinity of observation, relationship, and inspiration as a background for any kind of connection practices that I do. So I find that the first layer is always the space itself, where I perceive the space as being alive. And there's people like Rupert Sheldrake who's talking about these morphogenetic fields of resonance. And he's saying that the memory is actually kept in the space and not necessarily just in our brain, but our brain is able to read the memory that's in the space. So whenever I come back to a place where I've been before, I remember how I felt at the time in this phase of my life. And so by connecting to space and the memory that's held in space, if you try and extend beyond our personal memory and access like an ancestral memory that is kept in the space. And obviously like cities and historical places will have more layers of ancestral memory. And natural places might be very untouched by ancestral memories or still feel very clear, but there might be other kinds of informations like the kind of trees that were standing there beforehand. And where I live now in Belgium, there was a very old beech forest at some point. And I find that that's by connecting to space and acknowledging that space holds information, I can set an intention to travel to this older version of the forest that I'm in. That's one way of starting. And also I will ask the forest or the spirit of a place to guide me to whenever I'm exploring a new area. And the way I do it is to just start walking, but to allow any kind of beauty or lights or just sensations to pull me in directions. So I just don't have a direction, but I follow whatever comes to me. And a sense of appreciation is just a really good state to be in. Just say, wow, this looks beautiful. And then walk some steps over here, and then there might be a bird landing on the other side. And then, oh, let's go over there.
That's always the way I've found the most magical, enchanted places, is that way, always.
Yeah, same. So you already know the principle of just getting to know a space from that kind of curiosity. And for me, that's before connecting to any specific spirits that live in a place. It's like just like the whole space in itself. And yeah, I'll ask the spirit of the forest to teach me. And if I'm in an area for a longer time, I like to make maps that I do by hand, and the magical places that I discover, I place them on a map. So over a year or longer time, the forest starts to reveal itself in a different way. So I can integrate it more. Like it's not just like separate walks, but it becomes like a continuous deepening of relationship.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and so there's the observation, and then the relationship that's establishing, and then there's the inspiration that flows. And for example, by creating a map, the inspiration becomes manifested, and then it inspires me again to discover a new area of the forest or go back to certain places at certain times. And yeah.
Beautiful. And you were saying with that last piece, it'd be nice to hear a little bit more about that. If I've understood it right, it kind of the forest or the areas speak back to you and inspire maybe what they want from you, or like how you can connect with them. I think you mentioned earlier through dance or through song.
Yeah,
did you say that?
Yeah, it could be any kind of creative expression of, it could be meditation, like something really still and inwards, or it could be outside, or like crafting in nature can be something that I like to do as well, to bring an object from the forest and then transform it into something else, and maybe bring it back to the forest and leave it somewhere.
That's beautiful. I was listening to a Telesummit earlier, a little while ago, and somebody was saying that the sort of the human element, that what humans can bring in when we do offerings, is that we change. We can change what nature gives us, and then we offer that back. And now I'm hearing you say that again. I really like that. And in the last interview I did, she also touched on, she said it in a different way, but it's kind of like the giving back. This is what that feels like. That's the way I hear what you're saying. It's sort of, yeah, this offering back to the earth, but inspired by the earth. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, that's how I would establish any other relationship to a friend, maybe by if you receive something from a friend that does something to us, and then we want to offer it back in another way, or put our own energetic imprint on it and then deliver it back. Or it just also works between human and non-human intelligence.
Yeah, beautiful. So do you have any stories of your own that, a little something that you could share where you've done that process, and then because you shared about the map, I wonder if there's any other if anything else comes to mind right now where you've done that journey, and then what you shared back.
Yeah, so often when I feel I've been working a lot and I had to be like focused and in my mind, and personally I miss a little bit my connection to my inner child and that playfulness, which is not necessarily based on the purpose of having to get somewhere. So if I take that to the forest, I sometimes build little structures and little houses and dens and just leave them there. And it's not that I necessarily believe that any kind of spirit in nature will need me to do that, but it's just me engaging with my inner child and being in a playful state and touching the different stones and woods and plants and just having a good time, that the emotion that I'm feeling becomes even more important than the offering itself. Like the material outcome might be beautiful or not, it might last a day or it might last a year, but the real offering, I find, is that interaction of playfulness, and I find that nature is very responsive in that way. When also, for example, in the Bushcraft course, when I'm not just building a little gnome house, but I'm building a shelter for myself to really sleep in and to stay dry and so on. It's the same principle that by asking nature to show me where the right materials are, then I suddenly see something that I would not have seen otherwise. And it feels like, there's a question inside of myself. And then my focus is guided to a certain area of the forest, or I look up and discover something in the trees that I might not have seen before. And that all interlinks with this kind of same state that can be in whilst being in nature.
Yeah, really beautiful. I've had really similar experiences when I make little mandalas, or if I have a sense of maybe what I want to photograph in nature, and it starts showing itself and it starts communicating. And I feel often I've dropped into a different sort of vibration with the forest. I feel like the level at which I'm communicating with the forest on is different to like everyday getting on with things kind of energy. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's really great. I really like the way you've described those steps as well. It's really people can really go and apply that now, like have that experience of going out and finding that way of tuning in. Yeah, it's really beautiful. I love that element of giving back. and sharing something. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a stone in my neighborhood in the forest, which is known in local history to be seen like a table where people would leave offerings. And they've done it for hundreds and hundreds of years. So,
Wow.
yeah. I
Wow.
think we're just like continuing something that has been suppressed for some time, and but it's still just a very natural thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can just, for me, I can just see the nature spirits and the elementals just really just loving that it bridges a connection between humanity and these unseen realms. It's a really, yeah, it's a really beautiful thing that people can do.
So if we come back to the words nature spirits and elementals, I find that after looking at the space, like it's the first dimension, then for me the next step is the 4 elements. And I always start on what I can perceive through my senses before I aim to go into any subtle dimension. Because if I'm not aware of what I'm seeing and hearing and feeling in my skin, there's almost no point in wanting anything invisible to reveal itself, because there's so much visible, like the birds and just all the little plants and spiders and insects and all of these things. And I'll come back to them later on, because I distinguish between incarnated beings and non-incarnated beings. But the 4 elements are even before that, because at any given time I can tune in to the water, the stones, the air, and the light or the darkness. And that in itself can become a doorway. For example, with the water, if I stand by a stream, I'll first become aware of the rhythm that the water is flowing in and the rhythm that I am in. Let's say I might be faster than the stream, or I might be way slower than the stream. And I try to match my own rhythm with the rhythm of the water. So there's ways of doing it by moving, by copying the movements of the water. And I might just start going from side to side, just really gentle movements. So it depends on how the water is running. And then I can I'd use my voice and sounds to match the sounds of the water. And maybe I put water on my hands and my face. And if the water is clean, I might drink some of the water. So all of these things, they're not abstract, they're not invisible. They're just I use my ears, my eyes, my skin to connect to the water as it actually is right in front of me. And the closer I get with my own rhythm to the rhythm of the water, the more I get the sense that I understand its qualities. And it's not necessarily like a mental understanding, and it's more like an overall understanding that it's slightly mysterious, because I know that I'll never fully understand what water is. It always remains a little bit mysterious, but I can enjoy this quality of not knowing what it is, or not having to understand, but still getting as close to it as I possibly can by copying it. And when I then close my eyes after some time, then I might start seeing images that show me more subtle realms of the water element. And it's the same with rocks, or with the light, or with the wind. It's just quite easy to explain how it works with water.
Oh, I love that. I want to go and find a stream now.
I've got a stream just there in front of my window.
Oh.
I'm also drinking that water, which is another aspect. I think if you drink water from bottles, which comes from all over the world,
yeah,
then if the water holds memory, then we get all these memory, all these places.
Yeah.
And by drinking local water, if you can find a spring or like a good source of local water, that really helps to be more grounded in the space and in this elemental connection.
Nice tip. Yeah. Yeah.
And then in mythology, we find that image of giants, which for me are linked to the 4 elements. Because in a way, what our ancestors said about giants is that they're opposed to the order that we create as human beings. And
Say that again. It just the sound went a bit funny. Say that again.
Oh yeah. So the giants.
Okay, so we're talking about the giants.
Yeah, the way I perceive them and the way that they are presented in mythology is that there are forces that are opposed to the human order that we try to create for our survival.
Ah.
It might be that the rolling rock that's coming down a hill and that's destroying a house can be seen as a force which is much greater than us and that we can't negotiate with. So, and the same thing with a volcano or a storm. So there are giants of fire, there are giants of earth, there are giants of wind, and on the ocean there are giants of the waves. And all of them, they don't necessarily care about our needs. Maybe like some people walk through forests and they don't even see the little insects that are crawling on the ground. They will just step on them.
Yeah.
And not aware that they are trying to create something like a certain order for them. And in the same way, the giants are like the raw elemental forces that are dangerous to us, put into like a shape that can be talked about. And I find that often the stories that we have, they're like an interface or like an imagination between the raw forces of nature and us as human beings.
Wow. That's just the synchronicity of what you've just shared after the last interview and what we spoke about off camera is just so fascinating. Thank you for that piece. That's really good for me. Yeah. Wow. I've never thought about giants in that way. I've been curious about them recently. So yeah, that's really interesting. Really interesting. Thank you. Yeah. Great. I'll let you continue.
Communicate with, because they're generally a storm or like a volcano, they're not really interested in having a communication with
that's what this woman was saying to me, that she was like, and I was just, what she was sharing, it was sort of feeling the energy of these big rocks, and it's like they've seen humanity come and go, and yet they are there. They're like always there somehow on this slightly different, I don't know, slightly different level. Yeah. On a bigger level. Yeah, really fascinating. So is there, have you personally ever communicated with them? Or are they just not interested?
I'm quite happy to stay away from very chaotic forces that might be detrimental to my life. I think it's an interesting concept to imagine them as giants, and what I like is to find out what they stand for and then be aware of that dimension in life. So if there's an earthquake or something, that just shows us how little the order that we create means in terms of the bigger picture. If the earth is just shaking a little bit, and yeah, suddenly hundreds and hundreds of houses are gone, and it's just good to remain aware of the kind of, we sometimes believe as human beings that we are all important on this planet, and it's just a matter of perspective, really. And I think the giants are for me like a personal reminder of that kind of sense of perspective, and knowing that I can be tiny compared to giant forces that are not even aware of me. And yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you for sharing that. That's so cool. Yeah.
There's the space, and then there's the elements. And then for me, the next thing is the incarnated spirits and beings, which are for me the trees and the plants and the mushrooms and the animals. They're all, in my eyes, alive, and we can communicate with them. And sometimes the communication is not happening in words, but more through immediate body response or just emotions and instincts.
Is that what you mean by immediate body response? By feeling the emotions in the body?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also through nutrition, for example. I first had the idea that we can actually eat nature spirits, and that we eat nature spirits all the time when I had Lyme's disease, because I had a very fascinating experience, or two experiences, which I can share if you like.
Yeah, I'd love to hear them.
So in 2013, I had Lyme's disease, and for 3 months I had to stay in my bed, and I could not do anything, and even just thinking took too much energy. So I had to stop thinking because I just couldn't afford it, because the disease was just squeezing out the life energy out of my system. And in that state, I became very hypersensitive to all kinds of food. And I had to stop eating for a couple of days. And then I reintroduced every single food one after the other to really find out if my body wanted it or not. And on one day I had a glass of milk, and the doctor told me, like, yeah, if you take antibiotics, just make sure you drink some milk for the bacteria. And I thought, I'm not sure about it, but I tried. And I drank a glass of milk, and within 5 to 10 minutes I became very melancholic. And I just went to my room and I sat down on a chair and I looked out of the window, and I just started crying because I became very, very sad. And then I could see, like, with open eyes, this kind of hologram of a cow, of a little calf.
Oh my God, I can feel it already. Yeah.
It came over to me and it started licking my cheeks. And I was so sad, and I could feel that the sadness I was feeling was the sadness of the cow and the calf that had been separated in order to produce this milk. And because I was fasting and I was having this hypersensitivity from the Lyme's disease, this became such an immediate feedback that stayed with me for a long time, this, to know that this is actually happening all the time.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of sensitivity. And on another day, I ate apple and pear. And again, I was sitting in my room and I was just like really cheerful. And I suddenly became aware how the apple and the pear was entering my body through the digestion, and they start to inform my body with all that they bring from the alchemy that they do with the light and the soil and the water, and it's all in the fruit. And then this conversation happened between the apple and the pear, and I was just sitting there, and the apple and the pear, they were like, oh yeah, and we're related to each other, and we get along really well, and so nice to meet you. And later on, when I researched the apple and the pear, I found out that they both belong to the rose family, which I didn't know, but they're actually biologically they are related. And I had this kind of conversation just in the state of hypersensitivity that I didn't know what to think about it in that moment. But I genuinely believe that there's communication that is happening through all the bacteria in our guts and the way that our consciousness works. And so that we're eating nature spirits all the time. And
that's an amazing concept, isn't it? Or experience. Yeah.
It's also reflected in shamanism, where, for example, in the Amazon, the shamans, they do a dieta, where they would stop eating for some days, and then they would be fasting on only one single plant to really get to know that plant in terms of its medicinal properties, but also its spiritual dimension, and really connect to the spirit of the plant by reducing. And without knowing that concept, I had done it intuitively, just out of necessity, because the disease was forcing me to really look at my diet in a very precise way.
Gosh, did that experience then really change your relationship with food and life?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I stopped eating meat when I was 11 years old. And I didn't know any other vegetarians at that time, but in the same phase, I stopped watching television, and I knew that I wanted to become a forest guard and spend all my life in the forest. So I don't know, at some point around this time in my life, there were already some kind of big decisions that happened.
Wow.
The Lyme's disease really turned me upside down and inside out, and really forced me to be very clear. Yeah.
Amazing, isn't it, to be able to experience something that somebody would see as a bad illness in such a positive light, that it actually is gifting you like a whole shift in your reality to support, to align you to who you came here to be. It's beautiful.
And it's interesting that when you look at nature spirits, Lyme's disease is probably not the spirit that you want to connect with when you walk through the forest.
Absolutely.
Like, oh no, there's ticks, shit. And
yeah, totally.
After having Lyme's disease, I was so I didn't know if I would ever be able to go into forest again. And that's what's most meaningful in my life. So when I had this disease, I was thinking about what it would mean to me to having to avoid the forest altogether because of a risk of getting Lyme's disease again. And I found out that the fear of the ticks is actually attracting them compared to and for some time I was very afraid when I was walking through the forest, because I had experienced the disease before. And what happened is that I really started to establish a relationship with the ticks, and said, okay, I have to know where they are. I have to know when they're on my body. I want my body to tell me that I have a tick on me before they're able to bite me. And in the last 3 or 4 years, I've really refined that relationship with the ticks, so that I hardly get bitten at all, and I'm often able to identify the area in the forest where they are. So again, by observation of nature, I can do crafting of relationship, and the inspiration I get from it is just to move slightly differently and to acknowledge their presence instead of remaining in a state of fear and limiting myself and not going into nature anymore.
Wow. That's a really powerful practice. And
so the tick can become a teacher.
Yeah, totally. Isn't everything, right? Isn't it? Everything is our teacher when we come into relationship with it. Yeah. I heard a similar thing about sharks as well, that you said the ticks were attracted to the fear. And I heard that was the same for sharks. They're not really interested in humans, to eat humans or anything, but they get drawn by the fear. The fear draws them in.
There's a biological mechanism that's really obvious for that as well, where the tick has like an antenna which react to chemicals that we have in our sweat and in our whatever is around our bodies, and they react to acidity. And whenever we are in a state of fear, our acidity increases, and also alcohol and caffeine in certain foods increase in acidity and will make us more attractive for ticks. It's actually, again, by changing the diet, which also happened during the Lyme's disease, the ticks are less likely to feel attracted. And the whole topic of fear was also part of the Lyme's disease itself. So there's like a closed cycle where I can see like a biological dimension, which is scientific, and then an emotional and an inner dimension, which just makes perfect sense, and which is really transformational.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that.
And I find that when I'm looking at the incarnated beings in the forest, the plants seem to have like a really, really big role in terms of our connection to all the invisible beings, so the non-incarnated beings. And by working with the plants, they can be like a door opener to the more subtle realms. And for me, the plants are really the mediators between the elements and the four elements and our human body. So they are so much better in taking in the light and minerals from the ground, and we get them through the plants, or through other animals who get them from plants. So again, between these four elements and our connection to the elemental realm, there's this whole area of plants that are incarnated beings that we can touch, we can smell, we can even listen to them, and there's so much research that shows that they are like communicative and that they're communicating amongst each other, and I find that that's a very good way to start again through the senses and then slowly become more subtle, rather than sitting under a tree and wanting to see a fairy and not being able to connect to the tree, which is already so visible and tangible for us.
So with the plants, are there specific plants that you work with that you use to take you deeper?
Yeah, definitely. So there's ground ivy.
You showed me that one, didn't you? I think.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
When I went out for a walk. Yeah, that's in ground ivy is very, very good for all that's related to grounding and connection to the earth. And what works really well is to walk bare feet and to have a ring of ground ivy around the head. So suddenly everything just goes down a little bit more. It's like, as if the roots that the ground ivy is growing like very close to the ground. And it's like by having it around the head and having bare feet on the ground, that we become more able to go into a deeper connection with the earth. And then there's mugwort. I don't know if you've ever worked with mugwort.
Do people use it for dreaming? Is it one?
Yeah, it's also related to dreaming.
Yeah, I think I've only used it once for dreaming. Yeah.
So in my eyes, mugwort is a plant that can facilitate communication with all other plants. So it's like a master plant, if you like, where maybe other plants, they're more, if you communicate with them through fasting with one particular plant or tinctures, they may be more specific, but the mugwort, I find, is it's like a queen in the queendom of the plants. So she knows everyone else. And if I connect with mugwort, or I do smudging with mugwort, and then I open myself for communication with other beings, that the mugwort will help me to translate between my way of being in the world and other non-human forms of intelligence. And because I guess sometimes we expect that we're going to see some kind of non-incarnated forces, but I find that often they communicate through emotions. So we could sit on a rock and just stare into the forest and go, oh, where are they? Where are they? I can't see anything. Whilst maybe on an emotional level it's already happening, but we're just not aware of the conversation.
Yeah.
And I find that the mugwort is very cleansing and protecting. So it becomes much easier to just be receptive, because we are in like a clean space and feel more secure, and then it might be just easier to listen to the emotions, and then suddenly it's like, oh, actually since I've came into this area of the forest, my emotions have shifted in a particular way. And when I'm walking out of that area, my emotions again shift in a particular way. And I might be able to go back to that area and experience a similar quality. So, yeah, instead of looking for invisible things, it's really coming into the body, into the senses. And certain plants are very good in facilitating that kind of, energetic space.
So just on a really practical level, you mentioned smudging with the mugwort. So I take it then you picked it and dried it, and then you smudge with it. Are there other ways that you would actually use the plants?
Yeah, what's really important is that when you harvest the mugwort, that you know that you're already engaging with nature spirit, with an incarnated being that is a plant.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of taking the plant to be able to connect with something else, it's very important to connect to the plant straight away, because if there's no relationship to you in the mugwort, then the mugwort will not necessarily be willing to help you communicate with other spirits in nature. So
and it might be a specific plant that wants to work, you know, out of all the mugworts that are growing, there might be a specific one as well that wants to.
That's a very good point that I forgot to mention earlier. When we're working with incarnated beings like plants and animals, there's always the distinction between this particular tree and then the spirit of that family of trees. Like I'm standing under an oak tree. There's this particular oak tree, which might be young or old or happy or unhappy, and then the spirit of the oak, which is embodied in all the oaks everywhere on the planet. So when I'm engaging in a communication, I have to be clear if I'm talking to this particular plant or this particular tree, or if I'm using this tree, or if I'm asking this tree to be a bridge between me and the spirit of that tree as a general, broader plant spirits.
Yeah,
and
that's a great point.
What you just said, you could. If I ask a plant, are you willing to work with me, and I just hold the leaf before I pull it away, then I just feel in my stomach, is there a yes, and is there no? And if there's a no, it's good to respect it. And when I was younger, I once harvested mugwort, and I got the feeling that, oh, it doesn't really want to work with me. But I said, I just want to have it anyway. I collected it and I smudged it, and it didn't have a smell at all.
Wow.
It was as if the plant has completely withdrawn its qualities.
Yeah.
The physical representation became completely useless. I couldn't use it for smudging. So
that was actually a really great choice in that moment, wasn't it, to do that, because then you got to like experience that and have that first-hand knowing that to respect the
mistakes, or it's not even mistakes, it's just making experiences and running an experiment. Because if you just believe that someone else said I have to make an offering, you will not really understand what it means. But by making an experiment, it becomes much more tangible why there's this emphasis on building relationship.
I like that.
We're not cut off as humans. We're part of a web of relationships. We are eating plants, we're eating animals, we're breathing in air, we need light. And to work in relationship and cooperation is always better than just taking the things that we believe that we need for whatever reasons. And so just to come back to your question, you can make tea from mugwort. Yeah, so tinctures, you could use mugwort and put it in a medicine pouch with other sacred objects that you carry, and it will yeah, it will help to keep them energetically protected and clear.
Nice.
And but you have to be aware that for pregnant women, mugwort can induce an abortion. So for anyone who is pregnant and who wants to stay pregnant, mugwort shouldn't be consumed. Even just smudging it could be
Okay.
enough to. And that's why mugwort has been linked to midwives for a long time. It's a very powerful plant, and so it's just good to research a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you for sharing that piece. Yeah.
How much time have we left?
So maybe 10 minutes.
Okay, so there's something I would like to say about the non-incarnated beings in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And about cycles of day and night. And I'll start with the cycles because just in the same way as there are different animals and birds in the forest at day and at night, there's also different spirits in the daytime and the nighttime. And if someone has only been connecting with the forest in the daytime, it might be very interesting to go and connect in the nighttime because there's a whole different vibe and a whole different scenario that we can explore. And when it comes to non-incarnated beings, I find that one simple way of starting is a distinction that again I found in mythology. And there's an image where when you look up into the branches, there's the realm of light elves, or like an elven realm, which is basically all white and green and golden. And usually this is linked to the air element and the water element. And it's said to inspire you or anyone to music and poetry, and bards or musicians, they'll be able to draw inspirations from connecting with the upper part of the trees.
Mm.
And then when you connect to the ground and to the roots, there we can say there's a realm of the dark elves. But they're not dark because they have any bad intentions. They're just dark because they live in the darkness.
Mm.
And darkness is not bad at all. It's just what it is. And the dark elves have also been called dwarves or gnomes. And they're much more related to the earth element and to the fire element. And the inspiration we get from them is to build and construct things out of metal or out of wood, out of stones. So whenever I'm working in the garden and I have a spade and a wheelbarrow, I find that this kind of energy of building a compost heap or working with wood, and it really comes up from the ground. And whenever I take a music instrument and I sit in the forest, I often feel much more inspired from the light that's coming through the branches. So in Nordic mythology, there's this concept of the 9 worlds of the world tree, and we are living in the middle world, in a garden. And in all directions, there are other realms that we can explore that share inspiration. And in Celtic times, a blacksmith, for example, would be seen as a magician who is working with the inspiration from the dark elves, or the dwarves. So the blacksmith takes the metals from the ground, and he's forging them with forces of fire and water to make them into something else, and there's a magical transformation. And then the bard is seen as a wordsmith, so he is taking the raw material, which is invisible, but is tangible in his own imagination. He will take words and make them into poetry that becomes a tool for something else. So on one hand, we have someone creating a sword, and on one hand, we have someone creating a poem. And one is connecting upwards, and the other one is connecting downwards. But they're both accessing this inspiration from the realm that they're working with. So again, with like observation of nature, and then the establishing of relationship, and then the inspiration that comes from that, which is visible in all kind of different crafts and professions, and especially when we spend more time in nature, the invisible becomes visible through the work of our hands, or the words that we use, or the music that we play in different places. And that's why I recommend starting in the senses and in everything that's material and that is incarnated, and then slowly find a way into the more subtle realms. And all of nature is spirit, and spirit is nature. And I find that as human beings have a very important role, because we are somehow the gatekeepers between the visible and the invisible. Mm-hmm. And everything we have around us has started in the, everything that's man-made has started in the invisible realm. So the table that my computer is standing on has first been designed by someone who might have taken a pen and a paper and just started to draw a sketch to how to build this table, and then starts to materialize it. And even a computer or skyscraper, they all started in the invisible realm. And if people say, oh, it's only imagination, maybe they underestimate the power of imagination, because all the things we have around us have started in the imagination.
Yeah.
And we have a responsibility to be aware that we are the gatekeepers for this planet, and inspiration that comes through us and manifests through our words and our actions and whatever we create. It's quite a big thing to have that ability to manifest from an invisible realm and bring it into manifestation.
Yeah.
And the word druid, just to find a way of ending the conversation maybe, the word druid in itself comes from oak and also from door. And the common word is duir, and duir and door, which means to me that the druids, they were aware that they are gatekeepers. And but in fact, every human being is the gateway into manifestation.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I'm writing a book about all these principles and ideas. And it's inspired by this idea of this relationship between the invisible and the visible, and how they both belong together.
Beautiful. Oh, thank you so much. Wow, that was a really beautiful journey to go on. I feel like I've just been on a beautiful journey through the forest, connecting on every level. It's really deep, like to have your perspective on, and I think it's really interesting. I think it's quite a like a male perspective as well. It's really interesting because it's more planned out. Like I would probably, I was thinking about all the things you were saying. I was like, oh, wow, I do those things. I started thinking about the stream, and it's like, I do that. I put water on me. I don't necessarily do all the things that you said, but I kind of naturally do these things. And it feels really useful to have you speak out that process. I think lots of people will really benefit from that. I think it's, and I feel like it will definitely, for me, it will definitely deepen my relationship when I go into the forest, and give me new ways of perceiving, just taking it a little bit deeper. I think so much wisdom. I feel like there's more conversations maybe that can happen as well. So
there's like personal stories that I experienced that I didn't really have the time to go into, but that illustrate the structure that I have laid out. And I find that it's one of my gifts to see the structure behind what I'm experiencing, and I'm just collecting information, and then suddenly the structure and the blueprint becomes clear. I really like to work with that kind of to see the bigger picture, and then to go into detail in whatever area, but to know how to get back to the bigger picture.
Nice.
And yeah, I'd love to have more conversations with you and share more experiences, and also techniques that people can just take into nature, or also take inside of them. Because I perceive that nature is not just the trees and the birds, but it's also the feelings, and our inner experiences are just, I don't distinguish between this is nature and this is not nature.
Yeah, it's
There's
all
much more to explore.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we'll definitely do some more then. That'd be great. Oh, thank you so much for everything that you've shared today. And I'll share a link to your website, and people can go and check out your illustrations and everything that you have to offer on your website. That would be really great. Yeah, thank you so much for your time and your knowledge and your experiences and your sharing. Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak. And all that you do, you've got really interesting interviews, and I enjoyed watching them. And I'm glad to be the first male voice, and I hope that there will be more men as well.
Yeah, I'm on it. Like finding some more men to interview. It's not as easy actually, which is really interesting. So, but yes, I'm sure they will start revealing. So yes, so much love to everybody who's tuned in today, and if you've enjoyed this interview, then please like it and share it, subscribe, and go and check out some other interviews, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.